Welcome, friends. Today's presentation is by George Davis on the topic Divine Assistance in the Quest for Social Justice. George was born in Chicago and has lived in Rockford for the past 42 years. His professional experience prior to his recent retirement spanned 48 in public and private nonprofit settings, addressing a wide variety of human service needs, including the arts, early education, child protection, disabilities, and assistance to individuals and families facing serious economic challenges. He is engaged in local, state, and national public policy advocacy relating to human services and early education, and served on a number of local, state, and regional boards and commissions. As a member of the Baha'i faith since 1967, George has served the faith in a variety of administrative roles at the local, regional, and national levels. Currently, he serves as secretary of the Heartland Regional Baha'i Council and was recently appointed to the board of the Baha'i House of Worship for North America, where he will serve as its executive director. George is married to Sharon Davis, retired arts and education administrator with the Rockford Area Arts Council. George and Sharon have 2 children and 8 grandchildren. George?
I'll mute myself first.
There you go.
All right. Well, thank you, Bradley, and it's really lovely to see everyone this morning. There's a few familiar faces and names that I haven't seen in a while, and some that I don't know quite so well. It looks like there are 9 of us on right now.
And we also have Gail on the phone as well, so we have 10.
10, okay, well, wonderful. So, so this is my feeble attempt to try to offer some thoughts on a vast and complex concept or idea in a relatively short amount of time. And so I'll offer a few thoughts, and then we hopefully will have some time for some discussion and or comments or questions that you may have, as well as just a chance to chat a little bit. So I'm going to begin with sharing a video rendition of the Lord's Prayer by one of the singers that was part of my my own spiritual connection as a youth.
This day, our daily bread. forgive our debts as we forgive our debtors, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory
As I grew older and, at my first experiences really with music were really singing in a small choir in my neighborhood, led by another person who actually was also someone who lived in public housing like the rest of us, but who organized a small group of children to sing and to visit different churches and to offer music. And so my world grew a little bit wider because now I realize that there were many people of faith who gathered regularly to offer praise to God. But I didn't necessarily, until my adolescence, really begin to think about the connection between those experiences and the condition of the world, and the role that worship played in actually addressing the material and physical condition of life, and what the two had to do with each other. So at that time, probably around the time I was 16, I met some youth in my high school, one of whom was a member of the Baha'i faith, and who, through a class that we both were taking together, introduced some of the principles of the Baha'i faith. That actually, at the request of our teacher, of our teacher, who was in a contemporary history class, felt that these principles were extremely relevant to our study of contemporary history. And so that was the first mention I heard of the Baha'i faith. And over probably another year or so, I began to learn about what the teachings of the faith actually were. And when I really actually began to understand what the Baha'i faith was teaching, and my world truly opened up and became really a worldview. And then I began to see my place in it and the contribution that perhaps I could make to making the world a better place. So that's just a little bit about my own personal journey of faith. But I wanted to have us think today a little bit about what is the role that religion plays, and some of the questions that relate to how we connect knowledge and science, religion. What role does the community itself play? What role the institutions play? And ultimately, what is our vision for humanity's future. You know, the Universal House of Justice, which is the international governing body of the Baha'i faith, recently made a statement around Thanksgiving in which they, to the Baha'i world, in which they pointed out that we are entering a period as humanity that really will require us to address challenges in many ways greater than any that we have faced collectively in our consciousness of those challenges. In many ways, those challenges have been with us for, generations, but now collectively we are becoming conscious of the reality that that we have to make some steps to really address them, or the very stuff that holds society together could come unraveled, as well as, not to mention, the dangers presented to our physical existence in terms of climate and other challenges that we face. And it can be easy to become overwhelmed and wonder, what is the path forward? And is there hope that we can collectively address those challenges? We know that in our own country, we've had the dual crises of dealing with the pandemic, which is the rest of the world is also addressing, as well as the endemic and persistent issues having to do with race. And we know that there's an intersection between issues of economic justice and the actual response to the pandemic. Many people have been displaced economically through just this one event, and at the same time, it has made us more conscious of the disparities that are baked into really our society, our culture, and the way that we do things. And yet, we then have to ask ourselves, what is the path forward? Are we left to electing leaders and then basically hoping that we elect the right leaders that can lead us out of this? Do political leaders themselves really have the answers? Is legislation and other efforts to really address change in themselves going to be enough, as necessary as they are, to try to make improvements or changes? And whose ideas, whose beliefs, and whose worldview ultimately determines the kind of world and the kind of future that we will have? So these are huge questions, and I don't I don't even pretend to think that I will answer all of those today. But I think there are the ones, among the ones that are in front of us in all of our local communities, as well as a nation, and as really as a planet. So I offer the thoughts that I will share today in that context. First, for those who may not be, familiar with the teachings of the Baha'i faith and its origins, the Baha'i faith is a religion that began in the late 1800s, middle to late 1800s, in Iran, which is modern day Iran, which was called Persia, and it was the environment that of that period was one in which Iran had declined as a power in that part of the world, and had become really rife with many issues and challenges, including religious and clerical corruption and very much at a very low ebb. And during that time, one whose title was the Gate, they called the Bab, which means the Gate, and then after him Baha'u'llah, which is a title for the glory of God, these two figures arose, and they declared that their teachings were the fulfillment of the promises of all of the prophets before. My beginning with the Lord's Prayer was because it reminds me of the promise of Jesus himself, which is encapsulated in the prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And with this prayer, which is also a promise, Jesus set in motion in his time the notion that humanity's destiny was to be one people. With the coming of the Bab and Baha'u'llah, they stated that the fulfillment of that promise and all of the promises of the religions of the past, from Islam to Buddhism to all of the major faiths that we know of, had been fulfilled. However, that fulfillment was not one that in which God would, just with our unaided efforts, transform human life to that envisioned by the Lord's Prayer. But that we as humanity would have to turn toward the teachings of God and religion and put them into practice in a manner that as individuals and as communities, we made this planet what is the Lord's Prayer has called us to. So, and so for Baha'is, among the teachings of the faith is that human beings, as has been taught by the spiritual teachers of the past, are essentially spiritual in nature, and that all creation is created by one who is beyond our comprehension. And that the only way that we can connect to the reality of that spiritual source that created us and our planet and our whole universe is through those whom he sends to us as teachers. And Baha'u'llah refers to them as teachers or divine physicians or manifestations of God's reality. And among them were Jesus and Muhammad and the Bab and Baha'u'llah, and others who really have come in an endless chain over the course of humanity's existence to connect us to our Creator, because through them, it's only through them that we can really know a Creator who really has been described as an unknowable essence beyond our ability to even comprehend. And yet, the ability to connect with that the teachings and the truths intended by that Creator for our lives is an essential foundation for human well-being, both for the individual and for society. So these are some basic notions: that we also all possess a rational soul that is not merely something that is controlled by our physical existence, but that guides the rest of our life, our physical life. But however, the direction in which we turn our soul, our spirit, determines the condition of our life and the condition of our planet. So all of these are basic concepts that I think are important just to understand. That these are kind of like, you might say, some of the basic teachings and notions upon which the things that I was wanted to share are kind of based on, and that's the reason I mentioned them. I wanted to start out by sharing a few of Baha'u'llah's statements about what the teachings of religion are calling upon us to do, to be, to become. And this is from a document or a book that was written, a collection of short statements that were written by Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the faith. And what they really point to is effectively a, sort of, you might say that the essence of what religion is taught in many ways throughout humanity's existence on the planet. So let me share. I'm going to share my screen so you can see as I'm sharing these. Give me a second here. Okay, hopefully you can see this. So in this collection of short statements about the nature of our reality and what is required of us, Baha'u'llah has written, and again he describes this book or this collection of sayings as really the essence of what has been taught by religion down through the ages, the ancient truths. O Son of Man, veiled in my immemorial being and in the ancient eternity of my essence, I knew my love for thee. Therefore I created thee, have engraved on thee mine image, and revealed to thee my beauty. O Son of Man, I love thy creation, hence I created thee. Wherefore do thou love me, that I may name thy name and fill thy soul with the spirit of life. O Son of Being, love me that I may love thee. If thou lovest me not, my love can in no wise reach thee. Know this, O servant. O Son of Being, thou art my lamp, and my light is in thee. Get thou from it thy radiance, and seek none other than me. For I have created thee rich, and have bountifully shed my favor upon thee. O Son of Being, with the hands of power I made thee, and with the fingers of strength I created thee, and within thee have I placed the essence of my light. Be thou content with it, and seek naught else, for my work is perfect, and my command is binding. Question it not, nor have a doubt thereof. O Son of Spirit, I created thee rich. Why dost thou bring thyself down to poverty? Noble I made thee. Wherewith dost thou abase thyself? Out of the essence of knowledge I gave thee being. Why seekest thou enlightenment from anyone beside me? Out of the clay of love I molded thee. How dost thou busy thyself with another? Turn thy sight unto thyself, that thou mayest find me standing within thee, mighty, powerful, and self-subsisting. So this notion, this last one, I want to maybe dwell on a little bit. They all, are speaking to, again, what is the nature of the human spirit and its relationship to its creator. And this idea that because within us has been really placed an essence that is not purely of the physical world, but that somehow we can, in turning to that part of ourselves, we can actually find our connection with our purpose and creation. I think is, again, a foundation upon which the Baha'i notions about the connection between the the individual, society, worship, and service is really based. So what is the role then of religion in creating a just world? Those are just kind of, maybe as we kind of build from those basic notions that are part of the basic teachings of the faith, how do Baha'is look at this? I wanted to share this passage about the nature of religion and its role. This is from Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith. And now concerning thy question regarding the nature of religion, know thou that they who are truly wise have likened the world unto the human temple. As the body of man needeth a garment to clothe it, so the body of mankind must needs be adorned with a mantle of justice and wisdom. Its robe is the revelation vouchsafed unto it by God, where whenever this robe hath fulfilled its purpose, the Almighty will assuredly renew it. For every age requireth a fresh measure of the light of God. Every divine revelation hath been sent down in a manner that befitteth the circumstances of the age in which it hath appeared. The incomparable Creator hath created all men from one same substance, and hath exalted their reality above the rest of his creatures. Success or failure, gain or loss, must therefore depend upon man's own exertions. The more he striveth, the greater will be his progress. We fain would hope that the vernal showers of the bounty of God may cause the flowers of true understanding to spring forth from the soil of men's hearts, and may wash them from all earthly defilements. So we have this notion that religion has a role in really imparting to man the mantle of justice and wisdom. And in one place, the Baha'i teachings speak about the notion that religion is not really rules and rituals so much as it is about really the spiritual teachings and virtues that its purpose is to impart. And that the essence of man's ability to fulfill his purpose is really in acquiring those qualities and virtues. And so then Baha'u'llah introduces this notion of transformation, that because we live in a physical world, we live in a world that's subject to change. Baha'u'llah, referring to the transformation affected by every revelation in the ways, the thoughts, the manners of the people, reveals these words. Is it not the object of every revelation to effect a transformation in the whole character of mankind? A transformation that shall manifest itself both outwardly and inwardly, that shall affect both its inner life and external conditions. And through in this statement, Baha'u'llah indicates that the teachings of religion are about the transformation of our spiritual and physical condition. So therefore, we really can imagine that religion has only a personal role, because the foundation of change is really in our connection to a spiritual source. So, a little bit more about this notion of a spiritual foundation. There is a prayer that many Baha'is say daily that talks about this notion. Bear witness, O my God, that thou hast created me to know thee and to worship thee. I testify at this moment to my powerlessness and to thy might, my poverty and thy wealth. There is none other God but thee, the help in peril, the self-subsistent. So to know and to worship. And in these two things, we open up the concept that knowledge, as well as worship, are connected to our relationship with God. The Baha'i teachings go on to talk about another way in which this connection is expressed, in that here, this is a passage that talks about the acquisition of spiritual virtues and seeking heavenly bounties as being another way to think about our purpose as human beings. And then in this quote, it states that all men have been created to carry forward an ever-advancing civilization. All men have been called into being for the betterment of the world. It behooveth every soul to arise and serve his brethren for the sake of God. So we know that, in every, major religion, there is this notion that we have a responsibility as people of faith to serve our fellow human beings and to really act in the best interests of our community. And the honor and distinction of the individual consists in this, that he, among all the world's multitudes, should become a source of social good. Is any larger bounty conceivable than this, that an individual looking within himself should find that by the confirming grace of God, he has become the cause of peace and well-being, of happiness and advantage to his fellow men? Know by the one true God, there is no greater bliss, no more complete delight. So we connect again our individual connection and praise and worship of God to really our being a source of social good, as really being an essential part of our purpose on this planet and our existence. So I want to skip a little bit here to head to this notion then of the role of science and education and the acquisition of knowledge. So part of this notion of this spiritual connection as being the foundation for a transformed world is also how we act and what we do about it. So once we've acquired this connection, this knowledge, and we have this impulse to serve and to somehow make the world a better place, then we have to find a means whereby that we are going to carry that out. And so this passage talks a little bit about this notion of the role of education in addressing social change. The perpetuation of ignorance, the House of Justice, which is the universal governing body of the Baha'i faith, has stated, is a most grievous form of oppression. It reinforces the many walls of prejudice that stand as barriers to the realization of the oneness of humankind. Access to knowledge is the right of every human being, and participation in its generation, application, and diffusion, a responsibility that all must shoulder. In the great enterprise of building a prosperous world civilization, each individual according to his or her own talents and abilities. This orientation has particularly manifested itself in the Baha'i community's focus on education, which has been a central concern since the inception of the faith. In its efforts to foster in individuals a growing consciousness and capacity to recognize prejudice and to counter it, in its practice of using consultative processes in all of its affairs, and in its commitment and unfolding of the dual knowledge systems of science and religion as being necessary for the advancement of civilization. So here we see the idea that that really the access to knowledge and education as a force to even recognize prejudice itself and to counter it is essential. And then the practice then of really making the necessary advances that we have to make also requires the application of science as well as the teachings of religion. More of the development of the life of the mind and independent investigation of reality, which are highly prized in the Baha'i writings, serve to equip individuals to distinguish truth from falsehood, which is so essential if prejudices, superstitious beliefs, and outworn traditions that impede unity are to be eliminated. And now, you know, Abdul Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, and the center of the faith during his lifetime, wrote, "Once every soul acquireth, that once every soul inquireth into truth, society will be freed from the darkness of continually repeating the past." So this necessary investigation of reality is an equality that has to become universal. And imagine a world in which every human being had access to such knowledge and opportunity to develop their minds, to investigate, to apply the principles of faith as well as the knowledge that is brought by science in addressing the challenges before us. Imagine the types of communities we would have if such an access existed. And a lot of the work of the Baha'i faith is really learning about how that process can unfold. So in addition to the individual, communities also play a role, as well as the institutions of society. This statement comes from a document on social action that was developed by the Baha'i World Center and the House of Justice of the Faith. It says social justice will be attained only when every member of society enjoys a relative degree of material prosperity and gives due regard to the acquisition of spiritual qualities. The solution then to prevailing economic difficulties is to be sought as much in the application of spiritual principle as in the implementation of scientific methods and approaches. The family unit offers an ideal setting within which can be shaped those moral attitudes that contribute to an appropriate view of material wealth and its utilization. And the next quote goes on to talk about the idea that if the challenge we face is that if we focus only on the acquisition of wealth, then we really run into a distortion that is part of the disparity, that creates really some of the disparities, imbalances, and injustices that exist in our world. Because if a person really, or a society begins to raise and value the acquisition of wealth to a level of worship, in other words, that it becomes all important and the object of life itself, then there is no ability to recognize when those who are not benefiting from your success, so to speak, really, you know, have been really left out. And it becomes about how much you can acquire and how much you can hold on to, even at the expense of others. So this moral compass is a requirement even of the desirable condition that we have to have in the world of acquiring wealth and prosperity. So ultimately, in the Baha'i teachings, the aim of all of our efforts individually and collectively is to create a world in which there is a true oneness of humanity. And I wanted to read as I kind of get toward the end of my remarks here and give you a little time to have a chance to say something, with the statement of Shoghi Effendi, who was the guardian of the Baha'i faith, and what he said about this notion. Said, let there be no mistake, the principle of the oneness of mankind, the pivot around which all the teachings of Baha'u'llah revolve, is no mere outburst of ignorant emotionalism or an expression of vague and pious hope. Its appeal is not to be merely identified with a reawakening of the spirit of brotherhood and goodwill among men, nor is its aim solely at the fostering of harmonious cooperation among individuals, peoples, and nations. It implies an organic change in the structure of present-day society, a change such as the world has not yet experienced. It constitutes a challenge at once bold and universal to outworn shibboleths of national creeds, creeds that have had their day and which must, in the ordinary course of events, as shaped by and controlled by providence, give way to a new gospel fundamentally different from and infinitely superior to what the world has already conceived. It calls for no less than the reconstruction and the demilitarization of the whole civilized world, a world organically unified in all of the essential aspects of its life, its political machinery, its spiritual aspirations, its trade, finance, its scripts and language, and yet infinite in the diversity of the national characteristics of its federated units. It represents the consummation of human evolution, an evolution that has had its earliest beginnings in the birth of family life, its subsequent development in the achievement of tribal solidarity, leading in turn to the constitution of the city-state, expanding later into the institution of independent and sovereign nations. And so, and again, just to also round out this thought, the principle of the oneness of humanity carries with it no more or no less than a solemn assertion that attainment to this final stage in this stupendous evolution is not only necessary, but inevitable, that its realization is fast approaching, and that nothing short of a power that is born of God can succeed in establishing it. So again, this spiritual connection. But then also, just so that we're clear about what we're talking about in terms of this principle, Shoghi Effendi goes on to say, the principle of the oneness of mankind, can conflict with no legitimate allegiances, nor can it undermine essential loyalties. Its purpose is neither to stifle the flame of a sane and intelligent patriotism in men's hearts, nor to abolish the system of national autonomy, so essential if the evils of excessive centralization are to be avoided. It does not ignore, nor it attempts to suppress the diversity of ethnical origins, of climate, of history, of language, of tradition, of thought and habit that differentiate the peoples and nations of the world. It calls for a wider loyalty, for a larger aspiration than any that has animated the human race. It insists upon the subordination of national impulses and interests to the imperative claims of a unified world. It repudiates excessive centralization on one hand and disclaims all attempts at uniformity on the other. So in closing my remarks here, because there's always more to share, we have to realize that the challenge we're facing is one that is not simple, easy, and one that will yield readily just to having high ideals. It's necessary that we work and to apply those, and they have to be applied in consistently among larger and larger groups of people over time, and in order for us to achieve such a large transformation that's required. and they will take truly generations to completely fulfill. The House of Justice, Universal House of Justice, states in a recent letter to the American Baha'i community, sadly, in relation to the issues of race in our country. Sadly, however, your nation's history reveals that any significant progress toward racial equality has invariably been met by countervailing processes, overt or covert, that serve to undermine the advances achieved and to reconstitute the forces of oppression by other means. Thus, whatever the immediate outcome of contemporary events, you need not be deterred, for you are cognizant of the long and thorny road beset with pitfalls described by the guardian that still lies ahead. Your commitment to tread this road with determination and insight, drawing upon what you have learned in recent years about translating Baha'u'llah's teachings into reality, will have to be sustained until the time anticipated by Shoghi Effendi, when you will have contributed your decisive share to the eradication of racial prejudice from the fabric of your nation. So friends, let me stop there and to give you an opportunity to maybe offer any questions or comments that you might want to share before we close. I see there's a few in the chat there.
If anyone has a question, if you just put it in the chat or just raise your hand on the screen or raise your hand using the software. I have one for you, George. Both Peoria and Rockford have been considered by some to be very difficult places for African Americans. What is a Baha'i response? Since our communities are relatively small, how can we help to turn that around in any significant way?
Well, we've had so much guidance from the Universal House of Justice in recent years and even months on our National Spiritual Assembly about the role that Baha'is can play. It seems that the broad framework within which we've been asked to operate or work as a Baha'i world in really contributing to the betterment of our communities and is really along these three lines of action. One is the community building process, in which when in the quote we read about the process of education, we have in the Institute process a system of education that allows us to put into the hands of people in our communities the tools that they can apply to their own circumstances, and to begin to collectively take steps of social action based on the application of those teachings, which is really the purpose of the Institute process. So we have that, and we can take steps to begin to share that with again people in wider and wider circles, in such a manner that it really becomes a collective force over time. The other is to the extent that we have the resources and capacity, we can join with others in our community who are like-minded, who are trying to address those issues in whatever form they are able to begin to improve the conditions immediately around us. In Rockford, a number of us as Baha'is have become a part of an organization called Eliminate Racism 815. And that organization now includes 300 to 400 people in the community in various committees who are addressing such aspects as criminal justice system, the education system, the economic system, and so forth, around looking for steps that can be taken that can improve these conditions. But the approach is one of, rather than being one of just merely challenge and protest, is one of really, you know, really researching and sharing the reality of the current state of things, and putting before those who have the influence and power the current disparities in reality, and inviting them into the conversation of considering what their responsibilities are and what steps they can take in a manner that creates dialogue and collaboration. And we've seen some significant movement as a result of that effort. That, again, not only Baha'is are in, but many others. Baha'is are in key leadership positions with that organization, and really 2 Baha'is helped to found it. And then a third line of action that is available to all of us is also engaging in significant discourses and conversations about how these principles that are taught by the faith apply to the needs and challenges of society, in whatever manner we can do that, from individual conversations with friends and colleagues and associates and family members, to forums and of all kinds, both of formal and informal, in which we have an opportunity. In Rockford, recently, several Baha'i women who have become part of a group of interfaith group of other women have been involved in a conversation in which the members of the group have shared from the spiritual teachings of their faith, what their faiths each have to say about the challenges of society and addressing race as one particular issue. And as they have done that, if they've been doing that together as a group, they have come to the conclusion very much that all religions are teaching the same thing when it comes to the spiritual truths that underlie the oneness of humanity. And again, the Baha'is in that group have managed to help keep the focus on the application of spiritual teachings, and not and maybe so much away from politics or those kinds of focuses. And so Baha'is can contribute, and these are just a couple of examples of how, and I think what it is that whichever line of action or combination of lines of action, and each of them reinforce each other. So we're now, for example, seeing in Rockford, Baha'is participating in meetings with elected officials like our mayor, who brought together faith leaders that included the Baha'is, and wanted to talk about the question of what do we do about addressing the needs of youth who are oftentimes at great risk, and oftentimes represent a significant portion of even violent crime in the community. And he wanted the ideas of religious leaders about that, and what steps could be taken in addition to what resources, public resources, can be devoted to the challenge, right, and private resources. Well, we have this thing called the Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program. And so now we have an opportunity to think about how do we offer that as one of the paths for helping youth to really attain moral and spiritual you might say focus and capacity to be able to contribute to the betterment of the community. And so the opportunity is opening up now for us to really share that. Recently, one of our Baha'is here, who is a teacher, and has invited, and has been teaching partly remotely, like so many teachers are, really decided to invite a group of girls that she's teaching to become part of a junior youth program. But she started out by actually going and speaking to each one of their parents first, and talking about what the junior youth program is about and what its purpose is. And they all said, yes, we want our daughters to be part of this. And of course, she invited the girls themselves. And now they've formed a group of about eight girls who have entered the program. But she was able to do that because of her close connection with these girls and her friendships that she's been able to create with them, and the connections with their families. So it wasn't something that was at all artificial. It was very natural for her to make this kind of invitation. I mentioned those things only as examples, but reality is that whatever line of action we choose, all of them take persistent effort over time, and they also require that the circle be continually widened to include more people. So it seems that whatever the conditions are in our community, that we can pick one or more of those particular paths, and then we can look at and we can create a process of learning about how we invite more and more people to join us or join others in widening the circle of influence.
Thank you so much, George. You established an unassailable foundation and then built upon it. What a wonderful discussion, and definitely a something to move us in the direction of what you're doing in Rockford. Any other questions from anyone? I know that David had one, but you answered it before we asked it, so that was very good.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's also important is we work with other groups and organizations. We have to make sure that we maintain the integrity of that particular process in a way that doesn't really, it's not a bait and switch. It's not a case where we're just only doing it so that we can, interest people in the Baha'i faith or in their in studying the Baha'i faith. We really have to be very clear about the purity of our motives and our intent, and maintain that. And this is one of the things that we've also found has been effective in building genuine friendships. And because the ease with which people can turn to mistrust and suspicion about your motives is something that is it can happen in a second if we're not real clear and consistent about our motives. But at the same time, we also have to learn how and when to invite people to consider what the faith's teachings have to offer to their own circumstances. But we have to be, and I can cite again a number of other examples, which I'm sure you can all as well, of how that can happen. But we have to, all of this. This is what is before us. This is our palette, so to speak, that the House of Justice has laid out for the Baha'i world and for humanity, really over this next who knows decades.
Wonderful. We are at our just about our 12 o'clock time. I don't know what availability is, George. Did anybody else have anything else to ask George, other than to just really thank you from the bottom of our hearts for this discussion?
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. I hope it was helpful to you, and that it will launch your series of similar events like this, and that you'll be able to really keep widening your circle. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Thank you for coming,
Thank
George.
you.
It's wonderful to see you, George. You are rocking the beard and mustache. It's just so cool.
Yeah, I'm trying to take after my friend Kanye West and.
Ooh.
George, down in the Atlanta airport, there's a series of statues done from Africa, and there's a statue called the Elders, and you are right there, man.
Hey, that's a great honor. It's a great honor to be associated with that. Thank you, friends, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you much, George.
Thank you, George. Love
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank
Hello.
you, everybody. Love you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, all. Thank you.